So welcome to our second Node.js sort of next 10 years of Node team working session. We are going from the issue that was created in the repo and everything that the sort of logistics that we discussed last time. It is issue number, hold on, let's see if I can get that, issue number, sorry, having trouble scrolling. Issue number 3. I'm just going to add that to the minutes. Oops. So we just got the repo set up, and the only thing that was tagged for the agenda was the things that we discussed last week, which was the values directions document for core, which is issue number 2. I will open that up. And I'm going to share that. I can find the right screen. There we go. So this is what we sort of finished off talking about last time, which was putting together a document which kind of is a starting point for where we would capture some of the output of the work we're going to do in this group in terms of like figuring out what's strategic for Node in the next 10 years. The initial comments around what it would look like included, including a bit of a mission, the values of the project and a priority list of those values, kind of a constituency of priorities, I think it's been called. And then, the key technical areas. And so I agreed to open this issue, and then we would continue to, we thought we would continue to, to work on that to figure out what that sort of what we think that document should be called and what it should look like. So unless other people have other suggestions, that's probably a good place to start for today. And then we can, if we finish that, we can think about what other areas we want to start to dive into. Does that make sense to everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, so picking up the sort of structure, are there people have had thoughts on that? What would we call this document? I'm not sure I've come up with a good name yet either. Like, I guess we could look to see if like some other projects have any. Does anybody know of other projects having something similar?
I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but it's normally in the top of the README, I'd have thought.
I also can't think of any examples, but it makes me just think of just as a mission statement, which is I think a commonly used term for this kind of thing.
Right, okay. So you're thinking like it could even be like mission.md?
Yeah, I mean, if it has the things listed in this, what the contents is, to me that would be pretty descriptive.
Mission and values, maybe? Help or hurt?
So I'm thinking of mission statement a lot from like like companies or teams or whatever will often publish something like this, and it sort of includes that.
Okay.
It is a little bit of both. Anyway, I don't think the name of it is going to,
make or break it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Would everybody?
I usually name.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I usually name my songs after I write them, so focus on the content and see where we get.
Sure. Okay. So everybody would everybody be happy with just mission.md as like a starting point?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. How about we'll just say from. Okay, so then let's move on to, and actually I should probably take this in the minutes as opposed to typing it all in the issue. So I'm going to flip over there, sorry. I'm just going to pull that off so I can do that. Okay, so then in terms of content, you know, do we want to try and write, you know, fill out the sort of top level mission part, or dive into like the values? I think the key technical areas is kind of a longer conversation once we've got those other sections ironed out.
I would say the values, which might help to shape what a mission, you know, statement looks like.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now,
Yeah,
I
values
do remember, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just that's an easy place to just brainstorm, and we can just throw things at the wall, and then once we've got
Yep.
a list, we can sort of rate them, and that is a pretty easy way to start.
Okay, so let's do that. I seem to think that, like, is it Mozilla who has the priority? Like, there's somebody, there is some well-known project that has a, like, we value this over that, and just
I
trying to
think the
remember.
way that was brought up, it's in the HTML spec, I believe.
Right, okay.
Was the reference that came up in the last
Okay.
collab summit session.
I'm just going to search for that.
It's surprisingly hard to find. I think somebody found a
Okay.
link to it. I did this search just last week.
Right.
It took me a while to dig it up. I thought there was a link in
In one of our past notes, or the collab summit?
in the notes for that, I thought.
Okay, well, let's see if we can find that. I'm just searching for that now, see if I can find it. Okay. Right, so there are the minutes for that. Okay, there we go. So here. So I think here's I'm going to paste it in the chat. I can find the chat. There it is. Oh, wait a sec. I think I just closed it instead of opening it. Oh, okay, there it is. It's
Yeah, I beat you to it.
so I just pasted
Sorry.
in there.
Sure, everybody's reading it. But one thing I think, we don't necessarily have to follow this
No.
guide, but I do think so. We don't have as many layers, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think saying something like, and this is also a values as far as technology goes. I think we should also make clear that there are values that are not necessarily going to drive technical decisions, but should drive discussions, or how we approach inclusivity, or like those kind of things.
Right. Agreed.
So this is really only a guide for, like, what are some technical values, like
Right.
I do think we should value users over theoretical purity, right? But that
Right.
has nothing to do with how do we provide an inclusive environment. So I think there's just two sides to that, the discussion we should have.
Right. So this is right. Okay, so I'm actually going to share the minutes instead, because it seems silly to be stop share this one. Right. Okay. So yeah. So this is purely around the technical values, which is good to make sure that we clarify that up front. Okay. So maybe we could just start by throwing some in. The other thing well, actually everybody can edit this Google Doc with the minutes. So feel free to start typing things in terms of, the values that we think we should be covering, right? Maybe would it make sense for us to spend 5 minutes and have people just type in, thoughts, and then we'll go through and discuss them afterwards?
You've just taken the one I was going to write.
Okay.
Do we still have access to the fun retro board that Darcy set up? Is that from the previous minutes?
It's the link to it is somewhere. You're thinking of using it, or thinking about looking at this, what was there?
I think we voted on some things and about what we thought were good, and maybe they translate to values.
Right. Okay. So let me.
LTS and stability were there.
It was definitely in the. And I've lost the link now. Oh, here it was. Here's the kickoff. If you want to take a look there, I'll paste this in the chat as well. Where did the chat go? Okay, sorry, but let me find it now. Chat again. So here's the link. The link to it should be in there. If you can,
Okay.
you want to take a look, open it up, take a look, because yeah. Yeah, I like the one Wes mentioned, which was like users over something, right?
Yeah, I think I haven't written. I'm sort of writing in another thing,
Yeah.
sort of getting my
Okay.
thoughts together before I copied them in.
Okay, never mind. I'll let you do that.
One thing I've been thinking is, for example, prioritizing user experience is very important to the project, in my opinion. But it's not going to be possible to prioritize it over security or performance, for example, on every case. It will probably be possible in some cases. So I'm not entirely sure if we can have a hard rule of X over Y over Z, for example.
I don't think they're hard. They're ever like, it's not a hard rule, but it's kind of like in general. This would, I think it's good to have a, like, in general, we would prioritize, like if it is that we would prioritize security or performance over user experience by
Sorry to
default,
interrupt.
we
Can
can say that.
somebody?
Yeah.
I think Michael, you're the only one who's host right now. Can you promote
Yep.
people?
Sorry, yes, participants, I'm looking, yep. Thanks for letting me know. I can hear Wes, I'll make you co-host as well.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not sure that lets you promote people, but yeah.
I think it does. Yeah.
Okay, perfect then. And anybody else want to be co-host, just let me know. I'll make Joe co-host too, just to have as many people.
Cool.
But Joe, if you're still driving, don't.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I forgot you're still driving. So yeah.
I am not driving, but I am on my phone, so I probably won't be the best person to help promote people.
Okay. Here, I'll promote Bethany too then, if I can. Come on.
Hey guys, sorry I was a bit late. Had a work call. Quick question. So what question are we discussing?
We're talking about technical values.
Okay.
And if you go to the minutes, we're typing them in under the section. You'll see them.
All
There's
right.
like stability, user experience, and so forth.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just go on there and type
Yeah.
something too. Also, Joe, I added your name to the meeting minutes, so you don't need to, since you're out.
Thanks, Divya. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So I still see people typing a few things, so I think we should go for a few more minutes. Maybe we'll continue this way until 10:30, and then is that going to give people enough time to finish up, do we think? Do we need more time?
A couple more minutes sounds good.
Okay.
I hate Google Docs. I was like, I don't think I spelled constituencies right.
And then it reformatted
I
for you.
copied and pasted. Yeah, I went to copy and paste it, and it pulls in all the formatting.
Yeah, it's the spacing and the stars are the only thing that really matter to me. The rest gets stripped out when I convert it into the
True, but I don't want to
M
be the
markdown that we load in.
who looks like I'm sending an email with blue text.
I still really think there was another example of users over. Anyway. Okay, so it's 10:30. People need a bit more time, or do we think we're good to start discussing?
Time to start discussing, I think.
Okay. One comment I saw in there was like, we should make a clear list of the constituencies. That's probably a good way to start the discussion, just because that'll affect like these other values, I think. Does that make sense to people?
Agreed.
Okay, so I'm going to pull that one out. Of course, I got that. So where is that? Right, here we go. So I'm going to pull this one. Constituencies. So I think we've got end users, right?
How detailed do we want to be? Would it help? Because I also think end users here is a really broad category. I think
Yep.
there's a ton of different type of end users, and it might help for us to understand some of
Yep.
the nuance there as well.
Okay, let's type them out and then we'll.
So there's like front end tool consumers, right? Like a
Yep.
Webpack person. There's backend like API author. Well, we could maybe just call it server authors, right? Whether those are serving websites or APIs.
Okay.
There's library authors. So this is where do those count as end users, or do we want some sort of separate category for, like, a library author to me is like more invested in the community.
Yep.
Whereas an end user more like, well, I touch it sometimes, but I don't necessarily there's like another step, right? Where library authors sort of are more invested, in my opinion.
I think
this is kind of / package authors, right? Just
I think library authors fall under this, about the same category as implementers on HTML. Are those implementers things like not just maintainers for us?
Yeah,
I think that's a case where it's not really the same, right? Like in their case, they have the people who write the spec and they have people who implement the spec, right? So I'm not sure we have the equivalent of implementers. We do have, Node.js maintainers, right?
But in some way, if we consider their product is the spec, and that's what they're talking about, our product is the core APIs. So technically, the people who are most building on top of the core APIs are the library and package maintainers, right? In theory,
although everybody uses them too, right?
That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think so. A front-end tool author probably, if you go look at the Webpack configs, sorry, not tool author, user, right, end consumer, like, if you look at a Webpack config, it might only use like require and path. Like, that's a common thing. So like, would you even really consider them? I mean, I guess in some the very lightest of ways, right? Where library authors in theory are using much more heavily the actual Node APIs. And I think the same thing does go in a lot of cases for server authors. They're using a server framework, which probably abstracts away a lot of the Node, and I quoted, my video's off, but I quoted APIs, right?
True. I think it's like, in my mind, I have no disagreement that like library package authors should probably be a different constituency. I think the end users, even if they don't use the APIs, though, there's considerations that we need to, like in Node itself, like for example, if we're going to make a breaking change, that might still affect them, even though they're not consuming the APIs directly.
Oh, totally. I didn't mean to imply that they're not constituencies. I was just trying to imply that I think that they're different levels of end user. Yeah.
I think that is worth, like, in my mind, it's worth calling out at least that the library package authors separately from end users. I don't know if you had other types of end users in there, right? But like,
I think there's like hobby developers who build, like, one thing, if you think about the growth of Node, like a lot of it has been due to the fact that a hobby developer can pick it up and write some IoT thing or write some distributed system experiment. And to me, those are sort of, they don't fit neatly into a front end tool, consumer, back end server type thing, but they might like do a wide swath of types of work.
Yeah, like I'm just throwing this in there, but like enterprise developers, like I don't know if you would categorize like the front end, back end go underneath there, or because kind of you're getting at there's the professional versus hobby side, I guess.
Yeah, maybe actually doing, how do you structure it that makes the most sense? Yeah, there's different concerns for a enterprise level versus Yeah, professional I think is a good word too, because it also avoids the loaded
Right,
term that is enterprise sometimes.
right. I think it's good we can like put as many of those in there, and then as we go through the discussions, it's like, would we actually, you know, would we call out any of those individually versus end users, right? Like calling out the library package authors, I think is a good start. I'm not sure if we need to pull out any of the other ones. Because I don't think, like in my mind, if we make it too complicated, it also kind of dilutes things, right? Like if we have 100 different constituencies and try and explain everything, it'll be a losing battle.
That makes sense. Maybe, I guess I was just trying to think of the difference, but maybe just calling it application developers would be a good. Sorry, I was thinking for the combination of. Oh well, that.
See, then I almost wonder here is there's like end users, right? Is
Yeah,
that
kind of makes sense, because then application developers, there could also be like you know, different from an application would be like a tool author, and they maybe aren't publishing it as a library, but they're just writing a small node script to automate something, right? Like, and it's just a one-off script that's not a library. That's sort of a slightly different experience than an application developer might have. Sorry, I'm sort of brain dumping. Anybody can cut me off. I'm just.
But that's the idea. Is like let's. I'd say like let's move on to some of the other constituencies and then come back to that one and see if it makes sense to treat them separately. And I guess the question will be, are there any? There's like our core maintainers, the library package authors, application developers, and then end users. I guess there is like, you know, like application developers, there can be like application deployers, operators.
I like operators as a word, but.
Because that's kind of like another group that, you know, are important to, you know, an application, keeping up and running, and to the, like, you know, the success of Node. If it's impossible to operate a Node application, even if it's quick to develop, that isn't going to be so good.
And are you referring to, like, you know, people that fall into the DevOps category?
DevOps seems to confuse things for me. Like I haven't, like you're basically saying you're going to be a developer and an operator, right? So I don't know that it's strictly DevOps people. It's anybody who would end up having to operate it after it's built. That could, you know, depending on your model, that could be developers, often though it's like a separate team who's, you know, actually deploys the applications into the production environments, has access to them. And I don't think, at least from what I've seen, that's completely changed. The other people can correct me on that one if they think it's always now the developer that does both. But
Michael, I can actually help you out because I was a developer and then I got switched to DevOps, so I can actually help you. It's more about, like, right now what we do is more about building pipelines and deploying, asking and giving it to the developers to deploy it themselves. So you basically set up like all the whole processes of the build, deploy, like for testing, like you build up the pipeline and then we just give it to them. And then we maintain the servers, basically it's the servers that would get maintained from our endpoint.
right, okay. And what happens when things go wrong? Do you get paged, or the developers get paged directly?
We get paged because we need to check if there's something wrong with the servers or with the pipeline. If nothing is wrong on our end, then we have to page the developers to let them know that something's going wonky in their code and they need to get it fixed or updated.
Yeah, that's still kind of what I've seen over the years, is that, like, there's the developer who focuses on building the system itself, and then there's, you know, a group who focuses on making sure it's continues to run correctly, and are the first point of contact if things go wrong, and then pull the developers in to help when it's clear it's something in, you know, a bug in the code versus something in the infrastructure.
I
Yeah,
think
but now
also
you also have
Go ahead, sorry.
QA people, and then you also have like server people, and you also have like infrastructure and network people. So it's like it's a lot more complicated, I feel.
Yeah.
So I was going to say on that note, actually, I think we can just list domains here and recognize that oftentimes people will fluidly move between them.
Yep.
But calling operators a different constituency than developers has some meaning, because if we go look up at the list of values, things like diagnostics are going to be in some, not always, again, I'm not trying to make, but those are going to be more important to operators than
Right.
developers in theory, right?
Yep.
And so like there's certain values that will, and when we're talking about the constituencies, it'll help us rate, like, do we think operations is more important than the developer experience? That will help us sort of give clarity here. Whereas like the nuance of, well, there's all these other things. Like now, if network engineers needed hooks into Node Core to get their job done, then maybe I think we'd call them out as an end constituency. But I don't think they do. I think that operators and developers are pretty clear big buckets.
Yeah, and I think we want as few big buckets as we can. So agreed with that. Are there any other, so we've got 5 so far. Are there any other major ones that we're missing? So we have the core maintainers, the people who are building Node itself. Then we have the library package authors, which is a large group of people who build packages on top of Node. We have application developers who then pull those together into like the end solutions that actually are run. And then we have operators who actually run those, help to run those things. And then we have end users. And I guess the question then is like, what are the end users? I can, like, now I'm thinking that, like, for example, in the case where we have applications developed and then operators running them, end users don't really play into that so much anymore. But if you have somebody who creates a tool and an end user runs that tool directly, then those end users still make sense, right?
Yeah, that end user might still have some level of interaction with Node in that, today they need to install Node, and I think that's valid. But I also think there might be a future where they don't have to install Node, if you bundle it as a binary all with your thing. But I still think them understanding that they are using a JavaScript runtime or something may have some value for us to call.
Yeah, I'm just trying to how we differentiate from, like, because it's not so much the end users of an application in this case then, right? It's direct. But even if you've written an application, you can actually then have an application that end users use directly too, right?
Yeah, we only really care up to the bounds of they need to know that they're using Node.
Right.
Right? And that's why I said if they have to install Node to run a thing somebody else wrote, then they are in part an end user. But as soon as you go past that, it seems to me like we shouldn't call that constituents.
Right. So it's kind of like direct end users, but that's not a great word, but it's like people who run Node applications directly on their machines, right?
We might be overthinking it.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that there's a group there, whatever we call them. Any other major constituencies? So if there isn't, let's assume this is our set. I think we started this discussion because there was a section here which is like, which is this one, right? Do we have like an equivalent?
Hey, sorry, y'all. I got to drop a little bit early.
Yeah, thanks. Talk to you next
Thank
time.
you. Yep. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe.
See y'all.
Like, what would our order be if we were to?
So the order of the HTTP spec one is really what I think of as like inward out, or maybe outward in. Anyway, I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know, but it'd be like the outside layer of this is most important.
Right.
We have some nugget in the center, which is theoretical purity, and that is the least important. If you can make it
Right.
work all the way from the center all the way out, then great. But if you have to make a concession,
Right.
try to make the end user experience, direct end user or whatever, great, and then work back from there. But I think in
Right.
some cases, the way we've broken this out, I actually think that it's better to make, so like I would put developers more important than operators, which are more important than, but package authors are like pivotal to the Node ecosystem today.
Right. And I think you might get some argument over the operators. I've seen, like, there's Matteo tweeted, we prioritize developer experience so much that when you get to deploying it and maintaining it, you have a big problem. But that's the kind of thing, like, that's the kind of, I think that's a good breakdown.
I mean, I'm sort of going to make a joke here, but like, isn't that good? We've already hooked them. Again, it's a joke. They've already written their app in Node. Now we've got them on the hook. At that point, it's just a matter of working out the details. I actually kind of think that for the quality of the experience as a whole, that is actually the right way. If there's details we need to make better in the operations space, that's fine, but at least we've made the developer experience good enough that folks chose to use the platform,
right,
which is a good sign. So to me, that is, even though that might be today the case, we haven't delivered fully on our operations goals, still I think that's the right priority order.
Right. Okay. So we'll write something out, and I'm sure we'll have lots of discussion. So consider developers over operators over maintainer, or over package author. Well, okay, here. So package authors over maintainers. But really, developers are package authors as well, right? And
Sometimes.
we could, like, you could say that developers include, and I guess you really want end users in here, right? Users over.
I'm not entirely sure this format is going to bear the same amount of fruit as it does for the HTML spec. The more I'm thinking about this, because package authors, while they might be developers, there's two boats.
Right.
I do think valuing application developers over package authors is sort of a false dichotomy, right? Because when you say package authors, there's a whole nother realm of things that just don't even apply when you're writing an application that we want to have an experience around, right? So saying that we value them over, well, it's like, no, there's just this whole other realm of stuff that matters to a library or a package author that is not the same. Like a package author, we're going to, anyway, I just think we're trying to sort of shove this metaphor, this format into the way our
Right. I mean, okay, so then we could just say value X over Y is part of what we're trying to get to, right? Like of these constituencies, if there's something that we can't satisfy them all, I think we could probably agree that we'd value the core maintainers, like we should value these other constituencies higher likely, right? If there's more work for core maintainers, that's preferable than trying to push the work up the stack.
I mean, just to be aware though, if you say push the work up the stack, if we say more work for core maintainers, then what we're saying is not small core, right? So like sometimes these things, if we want this to be the foundation of our mission statement, then it will directly conflict with things that people have strong opinions on the higher up stuff, like what does small core look like. I'm not opposed to making that, but I think we've spent a fair amount of time on just this part, and if we find that everybody agrees that maintaining a small core is supremely valuable, then at that point, no, we're saying that we value core maintainers over library authors, right? Because we just then said we're going to push the complexity onto library authors, right? Which is.
But I think it's worth having that discussion, right? Because that's like there's definite values to small core, but it's like what's the cost is where we've that's where we're getting into these discussions, and why we hopefully this could this is intended to try and inform and say, well, as a group we've said no, even if it's harder for package authors, maintainers, we're happy with that, right? Because that's what we've said, or the vice versa.
I think we could have that discussion as a whole separate.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and we have 6
minutes, and
we have 6 minutes left, but I think maybe we should close out on the constituencies, and then we'll have to, as a next conversation, get into like how would we value those things, because it's kind of like I think that at least having like a hey, this is where we could actually say like here's some possibilities, and then as we work through the different values, that may actually some of them support one versus the other as well, right?
Yeah, I think having had this conversation now, I think it is hard to make a clear this over that statement until we have an understanding of where more folks lie on some of these key technical parts.
Right. Okay. So we could we could try and see the relative comparison of these, and then that will actually maybe point us to which ones we're actually valuing, right?
Yes.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. So maybe let's close today with saying, like, are these the constituencies? Application developers, and I think I think it's good to keep library package authors separate for now. So okay, so let's just say those are our constituencies. Is that? I think that's a good. See if I can get this formatted correctly. We can probably come up with much better wording for some of this too, but Okay, so I'd say, given that we have only a few minutes left, maybe we should leave today's discussion at that, and then next time dive into these values and sort of figure out which ones we think would be prioritized over others, and sort of use that to drive the direction next. Does that make sense to people? I mean, we could try and do that in an issue as well. Like we could open an issue that's like, here are the different values, you know, how would we rank them in terms of priority? That might be good in terms of
I think we
help,
should do
you know.
that. Partly because I think there's a ton of folks who are not on this call who have, I think, need to give input.
Yep. Right, so, okay, so we will, let's see. We'll open an issue, discuss open. So maybe open issues. And maybe open PRs issues. Open, I mean, should we PR in the constituencies? I think that would be good to actually capture that.
Makes sense to me. Because then as people have proposed changes, they could just open a PR to add or remove.
Yep. Right, rather than trying to find the minutes or whatever. Like it seems like something we should be referring back to. So it's like, okay, there it is in the repo. Okay, so we should open PR, open issue with values and ask people to comment on their priority, on their ranking of priorities, right? And tag for, that works well as for the agenda next week. The agenda for next time. Okay. Any volunteers to do these two?
I can do the first one.
Okay, thanks, good. That's Mateus, right? I'll volunteer to do the second one. Okay. And we are at time. So I think that was a good start. Thanks for everybody for spending the time. Maybe the one thing we should do is I just chose the time for this one. I guess I will just rotate, like pick the next one in the TSC rotation list, provided it doesn't conflict with the TSC one, in which case I would just skip and go to the next one. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll add it to the to the calendar for 2 weeks from now. Thanks for everybody's time, and we'll talk to everybody later.
Thanks. See ya.
Thanks. Yep.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.